let me thank you all for coming to the celebration of the Feast of St. John the Baptist. This year it actually takes place on June 24th, which is the day that they're celebrating it all in Canada. And the first thing on my agenda is a Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The wreath is in memory of the Franco-American veterans commemorated in this Franco-American Veterans Square. Good. Distinguished members of the council, guests, friends, I guess I should tell you who I am. My name is Al Saulnier. I am the archivist for the League of Franco-Americans and the secretary for the local Richelieu Club. Now, on the Feast of St. John the Baptist here in New Bedford, we typically pay tribute to our Franco-American veterans. And I'd like to start out by saying that Franco-Americans have fought in all engagements with the United States, not just World War II, which is suggested by this tank. I'd like to mention 3 of those engagements in which Franco-Americans fought. 2 of them because they're not typically associated with New Bedford's Franco-Americans, and the 3rd because of the date. Let me talk about the Revolutionary War. Now, at the time of the Revolution, New Bedford did not yet exist. It was part of Old Dartmouth. And Old Dartmouth had a lot of Quakers, and they tended not to fight. And so in order to meet the quotas that were imposed by Boston, Dartmouth recruited other people to fill in. And in April 1781, to fill in the Dartmouth muster, 3 men with French names were recruited. They were Claude Dubois, François Parent, and Louis Toussaint. They signed together up in Taunton for a 3-year period. Nothing is known about their origins, although Toussaint later appears as a Frenchman in certain documents. Very little is listed about their situation. Even the database of the Sons of the American Revolution, which I consulted, can't trace them. Dubois was 20 years old and a laborer who was light-complexioned. François Parent was only 19 years old, and the youngest of all was Louis Toussaint, who was a dark-complexioned tailor listed as short. After the war, this is the only one I've been able to trace, Toussaint settled in Williamstown, where he was known as the French tailor. In 1796, he contributed funds to the building of a new meeting house, and in 1821, he paid $50, even though the record shows he was poor at the time, to help out Williams College. He continued his trade as tailor. He had a home and business on the corner of North Hoosac Road and Simmons Road, which was an important intersection. Simmons is now Route 7. So he had a sign so that people could see him whichever way they were going toward town. And the strange thing is that the local people couldn't pronounce his name. They couldn't pronounce Toussaint. And so they decided that what was standing at his house would indicate how they'd call him, and he went by the name Toussaint. So that was a surprising contribution, totally unexpected, of the French to New Bedford during the Revolutionary War. During the Civil War, nobody expected Franco-Americans to participate either, because the major migration from Canada came after 1865. But there were Franco-Americans already living in New Bedford who had been attracted by whaling. The U.S. Navy set up a recruitment post to allow whalemen to do their part, and I've gone through all the naval recruitment records out of New Bedford, and it showed that 25 Frenchmen and 30 French Canadians signed up, with a number of Franco-Americans of French descent. I'll mention 3 of those. 2 of them were born in New Bedford, Albert and John Jouvet, They were born into the city's oldest Franco-American family. Both of them had previously gone whaling. And the third I'm going to mention is William Benway, born in Vermont. And the name that shows up on the recruitment records is a rough approximation of the French pronunciation of his name, which is Benway. The second thing to look at to get some idea of the Franco-Americans in the Civil War, the GAR records at the Public Library. GAR stands for Grand Army of the Republic and deals with the Veterans Organization at the time. These are 3 large boxes, about that big, filled with pages of information about each one of the people who was involved in post number 1, William Rodman Post. There were 3 posts in New Bedford, and I'll mention 3 people who were in that one. The first one was a Canadian-born man named Ludger, L-U-D-G-E-R, Benoit, who joined the GAR under the name Luigi Benoit, but who enlisted in the New York Infantry Volunteers as Luger Bennett. All right, typically anglicized name. After the war, he moved to New Bedford, where he got married in the Methodist Episcopal Church here. Another one is Canadian-born Joseph Dupré, who's buried just up the street over here. E with an acute accent at the end. He enlisted in the 34th Regiment of Massachusetts Infantry Volunteers as Dupré with an EY at the end, and in the GAR as Duprez with an EZ at the end. He worked as a slasher tender in the mills, and he's buried up here in Sacred Heart Cemetery number 1, not in the Civil War section in Rural Cemetery. And the third one I want to mention is because he is totally different from everybody else I've talked about before. His name was Joseph C. Modet, and he belonged to another GAR post. And he was a man of color. And he was born on one of the French islands, so he had French nationality. And he served as a cook in the U.S. Navy during the war, where a lot of people from the French islands who were of color served. And after the war, the membership lists show that he enlisted in Colonel Robert Gould Shaw GAR Post 146. There were 3 posts in New Bedford. The GAR was segregated. All the members of his post were colored. The third source of information are the burial stones in the Civil War section of Rural Cemetery. And I've gone through and I've taken pictures of all the stones, and I've done a lot of genealogical research on who was buried there and how they fit in, whether they had French ancestry. But not all the graves have stones. Let me tell you about one of those. A man named Joseph Laflamme, L-A-F-L-A-M-M-E, Laflamme. He and his father, who was also called Joseph, both enlisted as privates in Company I of the 153rd New York Infantry Regiment. The son moved to New Bedford during the 1870s, and as Joseph Laflamme, without the final M-E, he's in the Civil War section next to his wife Lillian, and neither one has a stone marker. And one of the problems is that the children didn't like the name in mostly Anglophone New Bedford, so they changed the name to Fleming, and they moved away. And so there's no next of kin to petition the government to say, hey, we need a stone for these guys. So the Franco-Americans did an important contribution during the Civil War. And now, since it's the centennial, let me mention World War I, but much more quickly. There are more than 1,000 Franco-Americans out of New Bedford, according to contemporary estimates, who fought in the U.S. Army. 60 of them died. Many of them fought in Battery D of the 102nd Field Artillery, like your grandfather. Others in the 328th Infantry, and still others in the 55th Infantry. However, not all the veterans in World War I saw service under the American flag. 99 of the city's Franco-Americans went to the Canadian forces. 7 of them died. Some at first were disgusted by the U.S. official position of neutrality, and they went north to enlist. A 4th of them did so before the U.S. entered the war. Later, the U.S. was really particular. It rejected people if they were older than 31 or if they were alien. Even if, as in New Bedford's case, some people had 8, 10, 12 years of military experience. So those people who really wanted to fight went north. And then some people had left New Bedford as children. They were born here. Their parents worked in the mills here, but during one of the periodic strikes, they went back home and worked on the farm. And some of those died as well. There are others who fought for France, and tracing the people who fought for France is really difficult because of French government privacy concerns about military records. And I've spent 2 weeks actually working in the military archives in Paris on another research project, and I know how tough it is when something deals with personnel. It's totally off limits. But by looking at ships' manifests of people returning to the United States after World War I, born in France, I've been able to identify 25 people from New Bedford, virtually all of them weavers in the mills, who went back to France to defend the fatherland against the Germans. Now, on Thanksgiving Day in 1919, St. Anthony of Padua Church had a banquet to celebrate its soldiers coming back. In the printed program, it lists 30 of the parishioners of that one parish. There were about 10 parishes in the area that were Franco-American at the time. 30 parishioners had died, and 540 of the parish members had survived the war. The parish vicar, Father Ozias Boucher, had resigned his position and served as chaplain in the Yankee Division, and the French government honored him for his work with the Croix de Guerre. Now, Franco-Americans continued to serve New Bedford in their country in World War II, the Korean War, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and many other skirmishes. But I just wanted to mention those 3, the first 2 because they're totally unexpected, and the third because of the centennial. We thank all of them for their service, and we thank all of you again for coming.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here with you all this morning, recognizing and commemorating the Franco-American soldiers and the Franco-American culture in the city of New Bedford. I have to admit, but for this ceremony, I didn't know of the great sacrifices of our Franco-American community to secure our freedoms. We have so much to be thankful for, from the French culture, from the Age of Enlightenment to to the Statue of Liberty. There's one thing I could say about New Bedford. I wish we had more French restaurants, but we can work on that. But it is really quite an honor to be here with you this morning, and I'd like to begin with this resolution. Resolution honoring Franco-Americans and their contributions to the city of New Bedford on St. John Baptiste Day. Whereas June 24th, 2018 is the feast day of St. John Baptiste, the patron saint of Franco-Americans, and July 14th, 2018 is Bastille Day, the French National Day, which commemorates that country's independence. And whereas France and French-speaking Canadians and their people have historically had ties with Old Dartmouth and New Bedford, both during colonial times and the American Revolution until today, and whereas New Bedford provided a haven for French whalers seeking refuge from wars during the 1700s and again during the 1820s, French and French Canadians served as crewmen on whale ships through the 19th and into the 20th century, and
right here.
Yes.
Okay. Whereas large numbers of French Canadians and smaller numbers of French migrated to New Bedford after the mid-19th century, becoming a mainstay of the textile industry and creating vibrant communities of their own, are citizens of French and French Canadian descent, beneficiaries of great religious, social, and literary heritage based on freedom, such as our nation cherishes, are an important segment of the culturally diverse citizenry of New Bedford. And whereas the celebration of La Fête de Saint Jean-Baptiste can be traced back to King Clovis, the first Catholic French king, a tradition later brought to Quebec and made a holiday, and whereas in 1908, Pope Pius X officially proclaimed Saint Jean-Baptiste the patron saint of French Canadians, and whereas at special ceremonies on this day, Franco-American veterans of all wars will be honored at the Franco-American Veteran Square, where the 35-ton Pershing tank has been installed in the presence of La Regiment Bourbonnais, that portrays one of the French infantry regiments that was sent to America in 1780 to assist General George Washington's Continental Army during the War for American Independence, and
whereas the many contributions of the Franco-American people to the general welfare of the city of New Bedford are greatly appreciated and deserved to be honored. And whereas on Sunday, June 24th, 2018, at the League of Franco-American Banquet, the following Franco-Americans will be recognized for their contributions to our community: Michelle Lee Laranja, Franco-American of the Year; Gerald Roland Messier, Franco-American Family Historian of the Year. The recognition award of the Quebec government in Boston will also be given to Norman Ouellette, presented by Laurence Gagnon, Communication and Francophone Affairs Attaché of the Quebec Government Office in the Boston office, and Oliver Moreau, who was also named as Franco-American Veteran of the Year. The Roland G. Vanas League de Franco-American was also awarded to 2 scholarship recipients, who are Colby Grace Deschamps, Dighton Rehoboth Regional High School, and Daniel Perry of the Greater New Bedford Regional Vocational Technical High School. And the Roland G. Vanas Club Scholarship recipient for the 2018 is Emily Ann Damas of the Fairhaven High School. Now therefore be resolved that the New Bedford City Council, in recognition of the esteem in which these citizens are held and their many contributions that they have made to the religious, social, and cultural life of our city, hereby thank the Franco-Americans for enriching the life of this community. And be it further hereby resolved that on June 24, 2018, in recognition of their great religious holiday, in honor of their patron saint, Saint Jean-Baptiste, the maple leaf flag of Canada will be flown at City Hall, and on July 14, 2018, the day commemorating the independence of the French people, the flag will similarly be displayed. Offered by the New Bedford City Council by myself, Council President Linda Morad, my colleagues who are in attendance today, the Councillor of Ward 3, Hugh Dunn, the Councillor of Ward 1, Brad Markey, the Councillor of Ward 5, Scott Leamer, and all my colleagues on the New Bedford City Council. We thank you for your contribution to our community, and we look forward to celebrating with you many, many more years of your contributions and successes in the city of New Bedford. Congratulations.
Thank you, Linda. That concludes the activities for the day. Thank you all for coming.